The Force Awakens. Yeah, The Force Awakens. All right, hold on. Can we start over? I feel like I have to get the first 20 minutes out of my system and then perfect. All right, man. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, take two. Here we go.
All right.
Welcome to episode 1 of Critic and the Common Man, where a film critic, Chris, and myself, an opinionated moviegoer, are going to be reviewing some of the content you guys have been watching while we're all stuck at home. Episode 1 today, we have 3 heavy hitters up to bat. We've got first the Rise of Skywalker. Everybody's seen it by now.
Yep.
After that, we're going to be talking about The Lighthouse, which is an insane movie if you haven't seen it. And then we're going to be talking about The Marriage Story, which is totally different pace from the other two, but a really good movie.
I picked that one because I was like, oh, Adam Driver, let's connect the episode. And it's so polar opposite to the other movie.
It is.
It
absolutely is. It absolutely is. But we're going to be reviewing some of the content that you guys want to watch. These are some big movies that are out right now. Obviously, The Rise of Skywalker just came out on Disney+. The Lighthouse is a big movie on Amazon Prime right now. That's what I picked to review. And then Chris picked the Marriage Story for us to review today. So we're going to be talking about all 3 of them. Let's jump right into it, Chris. Rise of Skywalker, what'd you think? And be forewarned that this definitely is going to contain spoilers. If you haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker yet, you're way behind the curve. There's no excuses anymore. We all have Disney+. So, jump on there and watch it if you haven't. But for all these movies, this is your spoiler warning. So if you're not interested in that, go ahead and click away now. But yeah, let's jump right into it. So The Rise of Skywalker, again, an opinionated moviegoer, not a film critic here watching this. That's your realm. But I like this movie. But again, I don't know if I loved the entirety of this movie or if I kind of find myself just getting really hyped up at the end and then coming away thinking it was fantastic.
It becomes a little bit about the climax of the movie and whether or not the rest of it is, as not meaningful, but I guess as impactful as,
Definitely. So it's hard to talk about The Rise of Skywalker, I think, without also talking about the last 2 Star Wars movies that have come out and kind of the feud between Abrams
and the legacy
and Johnson.
That the rest of the movies
exactly.
left behind too.
Exactly. And of course, the legacy of the rest of the movie was brought into this one. You still have characters like Lando, you've got Leia, Han, Luke in this. And of course, as you all know, in the ending, you're hearing a lot of voices from some heavy hitters.
I can't wait to talk about that.
Up in the whole trilogy. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, let's kind of start out at the beginning. So this movie starts out fast, and I thought the intro or kind of the beginning of it was intense. You're seeing Kylo Ren fly through, I don't even know, a planet, basically.
Yeah. So
and he's flying in.
And it's funny because you can see, if you watch The Force Awakens and you watch The Last Jedi, you see that there's a color palette, and this one jumps right into, this is about the Sith. The planet he's on is red. The entire first 5 minutes of the film, the color palette is very much a Sith color palette, and I think that kind of paints the portrait for the rest of the film. And I think it's awesome. I mean, it's very visceral to watch, especially as he's slow motion, just massacring this population just to get this holocron. It's intense.
They start out. Yeah, they start out intense, and it was a dark movie. You immediately are, we all kind of knew from watching the trailers way before this came out. Everyone heard Palpatine laugh in the trailer. He's going to be in this movie. Ian McDermott, his voice is pretty unmissable, but still
he does something very interesting with his voice. I don't know how he can speak so nobly. He sounds like a politician and just a very distinguished person. And then he can also get that really bassy, evil villain going with his voice. It's really weird how he's able to control his voice like that. Yeah, he's incredible, and it's hard because he's such a phenomenal villain, and he's done so much for that saga. But I can't help but ask the question of, why is he the villain in this movie, and where is Snoke? And again, trying not to go back to the previous movie too much, but seriously, we're just supposed to accept that the villain of this movie, the closing of this saga, they're going back to Palpatine, and they're just, Snoke's really dead. He's gone. He's completely gone. You're just supposed to forget he even existed, basically. And Palpatine is going to be your villain to close out, essentially, this saga. I mean, that's just really what they're saying, is that this main trilogy, this is it. This is the last movie. The whole time it was Palpatine behind the whole thing. Yeah.
Right, which raises so many questions. Like, first of all, how is he even alive? Who saved him? We got like, and again, as cool as he is, and as threatening as his voice is, you got like the Michael Vick experience Palpatine, which if you don't know what that is, look up that video after this. The Michael Vick experience. It's an old one, but you'll know what I'm talking about. He's like getting ridden around on this harness, basically, which I don't know who the people are there helping him. I don't know, but we're just kind of supposed to accept it and go with it. And I did. I bought into it. But I mean, what do you think about Palpatine being the villain in this kind of closing to the saga?
It's kind of hard to decide whether or not it really was like George Lucas's master plan for the story, or if it's if it's their like attempt to kind of erase what happened in the last movie and call it their master plan. But as looks wise, I think he looked amazing. Like the actual like appearance of the villain, I thought was amazing, especially in that scene towards the end where you see him being kind of like lowered on that crane thing, and you just see all the wires and everything. Like visually stunning. The lighting in those scenes too, with the lightning flashing. You see his face from different profiles just because the light is hitting it from different ways, and so you see shadow, like half shadow, and then you see his full face, and it really just shows you that this is a person of many faces. Like he was a senator, he was the villain, and now he's this like zombie thing. So it kind of portrays this image of this like endless villain that just won't die. And I think it's really cool. But I think if you're trying to create a new saga, a new wave of viewers that are gonna be fans of the Star Wars films going on, moving forward, I think it feels a little bit like a cop-out to just have Palpatine be the villain, but at the same time, they're also trying to close that loop.
I feel like and that's something I was going to bring up, is that I feel like they had no either direction or a master plan for what they were doing with these characters and who was going to be who. And it felt like in this movie, every character, you're like still trying to figure out who they are. And I think they do themselves a disservice in that, because I think we get a little bit less connected to these movies that way. Like, okay, Kylo Ren, for example. I feel like Kylo Ren, a lot of people, like in the first of the new trilogy, a lot of people were kind of dogging on Kylo Ren for, they thought he looked goofy, they thought he didn't fit the part. I thought he was awesome. Yeah, I think Adam Driver's really cool in that role. I honestly do. But I think they do such a disservice to that character by giving him like almost no backstory that's really shown. Like I almost feel like we missed the coolest parts of Kylo Ren's story. Like where is him training more with Luke?
And
where
to make him believable too, because
he's young. You have to make him scary.
Exactly.
Right? He's young, and you have to make him intimidating too. Like I'm not scared of this guy as like the main villain in this movie because he hasn't done anything to make me afraid of him. Like he jumps out of the ship in the first of the new ones and stops like a blaster beam in midair, and that was insane.
That was awesome.
And you're thinking, okay, this guy's gonna be cool, and then he kind of doesn't do anything after that. You know what I mean? He's getting out-dueled by a Jedi who doesn't even have any training.
And if anything, he's just proving the Skywalker in him by just being whiny most of the movies.
Yeah, the whole movie.
Yeah.
And now I will say, coming off of the previous movie and into the Rise of Skywalker, coming off The Last Jedi and into the Rise of Skywalker, Kylo Ren was a pretty intimidating villain. After his duel with Luke, where he finds out he's using the Force Ghost and he puts his lightsaber through him, he's mad.
Oh, yeah.
And you can feel that. And I felt like that was kind of his climax of where he was as a villain. Now, obviously, when he comes in at the end as he's no longer Kylo Ren, he's Ben Solo, that's a redeeming moment, and that's probably one of his coolest moments.
At the end of The Last Jedi.
At the end of the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
But as far as being a villain, I felt like he was at his peak at the very end of The Last Jedi, when he and Luke were kind of faced off in that mining planet, and he was mad. And I'm thinking, okay, he's going to come into this new movie, The Rise of Skywalker, with a vengeance. And he did in the beginning, but again, it just kind of fades out.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because if you're breaking the movies up into like a full story, you have the Force Awakens, which is Act 1, right? That entire movie essentially is Act 1 of the 1, 2, and 3 part of this new saga. And so you have Kylo Ren, and you have to establish what this new world is. We don't know anything about the First Order. We don't know anything about Rey, about these people, these characters, what happened to the old characters. So you have to establish all of that in The Force Awakens. And then The Last Jedi, we really want to see that crescendo of the villain, where at the end of the movie is really the climax of the villain. At the end of Act 2, the beginning of Act 3, is where you want to see how bad things have gotten, and the fact that your biggest savior in the Star Wars universe, where they've been looking for Luke for, years, it seems like,
Yep.
He's gone, and he's no longer there to help them, and now their only hope is Rey. And so that makes sense. You want to have the villain be on top at the end of the second movie, because it paints the direness of the situation for the next movie. And so I think that's why this movie starts so quickly. And then as a character arc, we really do see at the very beginning that Kylo Ren is lost. He's still young, and so we still feel for him, because we don't see him faceless like we do Darth Vader. And even Palpatine in most of the movies, like, even though we see him in the film, he's not Palpatine, he's the Senator. It's not until the end of the original or the prequel trilogy that we see that, like, oh, this is the bad guy now, even though we all knew it. So I think it makes sense to start that character arc and build it in the second act, the second movie, and then bring in the humanity of Kylo Ren through Rey towards the end of the movie, to the point where at the very end of Rise of Skywalker, she doesn't, when she wakes up after dying, she doesn't say Kylo, she says Ben. It's the first time we hear her call him Ben. And so it's kind of like a solidifying moment that he is no longer Kylo Ren. He's redeemed himself and he can pass on. So
yeah, I feel like I think there was a struggle in the direction of this movie to decide how much of the old Star Wars they were going to keep and how much they wanted to just kind of wipe it and make it a new thing. And I think they kind of landed somewhere in a negative middle ground with a lot of these films, because they held on to the older characters and kind of changed their stories, much to the lament of a lot of the true, like, Star Wars nuts. And look, like, I'm not coming in here claiming to be an expert on all things Star Wars. I don't know all the theory. I don't know all of the background stories. And, I'm not a Star Wars aficionado, but I've watched all the movies numerous times. So I'm just a fan. I'm just a fan of Star Wars, But if they're going to remake these movies, I honestly think they should have done whatever they wanted to do with some of the original characters in the first of the new series and then let it go.
Yeah.
I think it's almost insulting to, not to Carrie Fisher, but to the original fans of Star Wars, to just have her in this movie completely CGI'd the entire time. And to play such a small role, basically to be in this movie just to help Ben kind of see the light, if you will, when she kind of dies. And I guess I don't know what exactly happened there. Like her soul.
There's a lot of
Force
theories.
Left her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and I don't know. But
did you know that Carrie Fisher's daughter is actually on set? Like, she's one of the actors.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that.
She plays, I believe, and for those of you who are watching who actually know this, I believe her name is Beauregard, and she is one of the characters. So did you notice that Dominic Monaghan is in the cast? I mean, I'm sure you did. He played Merry in Lord of the Rings. He kind of hangs around with this girl in the movie in the background. She gets shot when they're on the Star Destroyer, and they have to, like, pull her back.
I'd have to watch it again.
Yeah.
To see.
So her daughter was in
seeing
this,
it.
and she's the one that kind of gave the okay to use Carrie Fisher. And what they did was they used scenes that they shot in the previous movies, and then put in Rey on top of the actor who was originally having this scene, if I remember correctly. But basically, they composited two different scenes together to create a scene where Carrie Fisher's in it. But it was Carrie Fisher's daughter who gave the okay, saying, my mom would have wanted this. So that's kind of sweet.
Gotcha.
It's nice. There's a lot of nods to the original films, which I think they were trying to use to the benefit of closing the loop and saying, like, we're done with this. And I think one of the biggest points of the film where this is proven is, like, literally at the very end, you have the burying of Luke and Leia, where Rey puts the lightsabers into the ground on Tatooine, and she covers them in sand. And that is, I think, a way for the directors and for the writers and everybody to say, we're putting this to rest. Luke and Leia are done. The Skywalkers are done. This is it. We're moving forward with something new. And I think that's beautiful imagery, and especially to end it on the original planet where we first saw Luke. And that same shot, the same shot with the two suns. Which
it was incredible. Yeah, it was an incredible way to wrap it up. I just think they could have done that maybe in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
And look, it's nothing against any of the actors. They're all phenomenal. Carrie Fisher, rest her soul, obviously she's incredible. She's an icon and a legend in those series. I just think that they were trying to hold on to the original kind of diehard fans of Star Wars by keeping her in these movies, even after she'd passed away, and keeping her in as CGI, when they had probably one of the coolest moments in the whole saga, in the new saga at least, in the whole saga, I think, when, I don't even remember her name now, turns the ship around and blasts it through Snoke's ship going light speed.
Last Jedi,
That absolutely could have been Leia doing that. And I mean, what a way to go out. And I was surprised they didn't take that direction.
I actually think that would have been a great way for her.
Yeah, I was just kind of surprised they didn't go that way, because it's like, okay, well, now you're going to keep her around for a whole nother movie. It's got to be more work on them to try to, CGI her in and to try to collect her voice lines. I know nothing about that. I don't know how they do that, but it can't be easy. It can't be easier than not having her in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they bring her in. But, dude, like, even the other characters that they're trying to save from the old movies, I think it just kind of waters down the story of the new people. Like, they bring Lando in this one. He's a big movie, but dude, they find him at like the Squid Burning Man going on in the middle of the desert, and he's in like a hippie van. Wookiee, stand out in the crowd, man. Get in my bus. And he, like, you know what I mean? It's like, seriously, like, we all love these characters. Like, dude, that's like, good. What else do you want? Like, it's just a rager in the desert. They're playing music.
I love
those
choreography
creepy babies.
That scene, by the way. I think that scene is well done. It's a little weird. I don't know. I think what works best for that is the fact that they're all doing this really cool choreography with the flowing clothing and everything. I think it's awesome, but it also, again, serves very little purpose to the story, in my opinion.
Right, and like they basically brought him there. And I mean, I know they get sucked in. Like, okay, so if you guys remember, they get sucked into that sand pit, which is where, I just watched this one not too long ago for this podcast, but before that, I probably would have had a little bit of hard time remembering this because it all gets tangled together. But they go there because they're tracing where Luke was to try and find this wayfinder. They get sucked into that sand pit, which is where they find this dagger, which was very convenient, by the way, that they even landed in that sand pit.
I've got notes on that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, dude, what, like, but also, those new, like, snowmobile desert speeders that the stormtroopers had were badass. Yeah. Those things were awesome. So, they're, like, catapulting the troopers off of them.
So here's a note for you. It's actually something that I wrote as something that works against the films, and that they all do. Every single one does this. And I don't know, maybe it's because it's a big galaxy and galaxies are huge or whatever, but I hate that they always, every movie, introduce some sort of new technology that, for whatever reason, wasn't in the previous ones.
Never previously existed.
Show us some continuity in the technology and in the universe, because it keeps getting bigger, but none of it feels connected. Right. like if you look at the original trilogy, those movies take place over the course of like 2 planets per movie, maybe.
Right.
And then the prequels, they've add a few more planets. You've got Coruscant, you've got Naboo, you have all these other planets. But then there's more and more planets, and now it feels to me like in these movies that they're just going to planets just to put a new setting in, when it really doesn't have anything to do with the story. Like, they went to this planet to find this dagger, which was, again, conveniently placed, and also a weird dagger.
Right, they didn't even know they were looking for that.
Right, and so that's weird. And then they just leave the planet. And the only it's like they dropped the thing that needs to push the story along into this planet. But that's it. Like, the planet itself serves no purpose. They could have easily done it on any other planet.
Right, and I guess that's supposed to be the Force, right? Like, what's guiding them through this. Like, I think you're supposed to just kind of accept. And look, I mean, come on, we're talking about movies where people have lightsabers and are flying through space. Like, there's gonna be some of it that you're just gonna have to accept. There's gonna be some of it that you're thinking, no freaking way. Like, okay, they land in the sand pit. It's pretty convenient, but name honestly any movie that really doesn't have like at least a little bit of that Force convenience, especially a Disney or a Marvel or something like that.
Suspending your disbelief.
Yeah, exactly.
Clark Kent, when he's wearing the glasses, nobody recognizes him, but he takes them off. He's Superman. It's that. You're willing to look past it for the sake of the story, and I understand. I'm not saying the movie's bad because I thought the movie was good. I really enjoyed the ending for sure. I mean that whole sequence at the end, the climax, the battle was awesome. Like I think
it was incredible. It was super dark and it was super intense, and that's kind of what people want. And the problem was that the other 95% of the movie, you know, when you go back and watch it, isn't that. And I think, you know, okay, so going back to, I was just saying that I think they're doing a disservice by trying to hold on so tightly to the characters in the original trilogy. Now, obviously, it's cool to see them, and I'm glad they were in it, but I think that if you go back and watch The Force Awakens, the first of the new ones, I actually think that the moment you start getting introduced to the older characters is the same moment that this whole trilogy kind of starts to go downhill. You're just getting into Finn and Poe and Rey, and the three of them actually have incredible chemistry together in those movies. Like, yeah, and that was one thing, like Finn and Poe, because they spend a lot of The Rise of Skywalker separated from Rey, they've got awesome chemistry, and they're really cool to like watch interact, and they're funny. Like, I actually found myself laughing at them, you know, or with them or whatever in these movies a good bit. But the chemistry between Finn and Poe and Rey and Chewie and Lando and Leia, it's just a lot. It's a lot to kind of force on people. There's a big age difference, and I think they were trying to hold on to these people to get the original diehard fans to go to the movies and see these and like them and accept them. I don't even know if it was to like them, but at least to accept them. But then you've also got a lot of people who I think are just going to these movies because it's kind of the popular movie out right now. I think if you went to a lot of people who watch this, 90% of the people, maybe not 90%, but at least 50% of the people who watch this movie, if you ask them, like, you know, name some of the newer characters from Star Wars, they probably couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They could probably tell you Finn and Poe and Rey, but like, okay, for example, just another example of why I think there's too many people in these movies. You probably do, Chris, because I know we just watched this not that long ago. But to the people watching this right now, honestly, what is the name of the chick that Finn met who's riding the horse? What is her name?
The Stormtrooper?
The, like, ex-Stormtrooper.
Yeah. I know her name. Her name is Janna.
Yeah, you know her name, but you're a freaking film critic, and you also, you know, you're a big Star Wars person. But I think a lot of people probably don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the name of the chick that Poe is, like, in love with?
Oh, I don't remember her name.
Yeah, like, dude, and we just watched this movie, man, because it's like we're what, 9 films deep? It's too much.
They're saturating it, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, they're saturating it with characters that we just don't care about. Yeah, we don't care because we have no backstory whatsoever. What is the name of? Okay, what's the name of the chick with the butthole eyes who runs that cantina?
What?
It's Maz.
Maz.
Do you remember
the
her?
Butthole eyes. Is that...
Yeah, dude, I mean, come on. What else can you even call it? But like, I guess I'm just trying to prove a point that, like you said, they're oversaturating these movies with characters that we have no backstory on, and we're supposed to care about.
I actually really like
we're
Maz.
Supposed to.
She has that like.
I do too. No, I do too. But you know, and she stuck around for a couple movies.
Yeah.
I like her, and she's got a cool kind of backstory, and she played a more integral role in these movies, and she stuck around. But dude, like, they're still introducing new characters, and like, freaking Finn is supposed to be in love with, I think, is supposed to be in love with that chick who, like, rides the horse.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my things I was going to ask you. I've got a couple questions here for you before we wrap it up. But yeah, you're right. And I think the biggest disservice they did to all the movies was to have multiple directors.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'm assuming that was never their intention.
Yeah, well, I mean, why bring the director from the first one to the last one if you're not going to have him in the third, like in the middle?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me. It creates a lack of continuation with the artistic direction, and I think it really should have been one person who directed the films, who knew what he was, who knows the story and loves the story. There's plenty of people, like you look at The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau, I think, would have done a great job directing these movies. He's a huge fan of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, everything he touches turns to gold, honestly. And I've loved Jon Favreau. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so since Rudy, which I don't even know if you've seen it, it's a sports movie from way back. I've been watching that since I was a little tiny kid. So I've always been a big fan of Favreau and everything he's done recently, including stuff that is nowhere near Star Wars. I don't know if you saw the movie Chef. We won't go into that now.
I don't.
But it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. That would be one I would definitely recommend anybody at home watches. I think it's on I can't even keep up now. I don't know. It's on something. I don't know if it's on Hulu or if it's on Prime or Netflix, but almost everybody has at least 3 of them nowadays. So check it out. But
Yep.
yeah, he's phenomenal. I think he would have been incredible to come in and do all of them. Definitely.
Yeah, and now J.J. Abrams did Force Awakens, and then I believe it was Rian Johnson, right, who did the
Rian Johnson,
The Last Jedi. Now, I actually think Rian Johnson's a fantastic director, but maybe there was a lack of love there for the Star Wars movies. I'm not sure what happened there. Last Jedi. I don't know what happened. I literally just a lack of.
It's a big ask, man, to be told, hey, here's
true.
like probably one of the if not the biggest movie sagas ever.
Mm-hmm.
You've got fans it's completely polarizing that we're even doing this movie.
Yep.
Half of the people don't even want it done. The other half are excited. And even the people that do want it done have like extremely firm opinions of how they think it should be done. Here you go. Good luck.
And then you have
Figure
the
it
fact
out.
that because Disney bought it, there's people who already hate it because there's people who hate Disney. And then
Yeah, that's true.
And then on top of that, the fact that Disney bought it, and then all of the works of fiction that had been created up to that point, where you have the entire sections in the bookstores that are just Star Wars, all of that, they said none of this is canon.
Yeah, not
And-
doing it.
and,
We're not
you know,
doing
and I
any of the
understand why
extended
they did
universe, anything.
But I think that like there really was like a huge polarizing of different audiences, many different audiences, and so to take on the task of directing a Star Wars film was I think a huge undertaking, especially when you're having to follow up somebody like J.J. Abrams, who's considered one of the best directors, one of my favorite directors for sure. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that Rian Johnson did a terrible job. I think The Last Jedi was enjoyable for entertainment, but it's hard to follow that up. And then, I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of different things that could have gone wrong. That, you know, then they tried to fix here in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I mentioned that they were doing a lot of nods. So, like, if you consider those 3 movies, the Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and this one, Rise of Skywalker, as one story arc, just like the prequels and the originals, they had a lot of nods to the original films, and I think it's kind of important to know that they went into this understanding that this is the last of it. Like, I don't believe that C-3PO and R2-D2 and any of them are going to be in any of the future movies. I think this is it for those characters. I think they're going to start building on new characters like characters that we've seen in Rebels or Clone Wars, characters that are off to the side.
Mandalorian even.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of different nods to the original movies that I think they did in this one, specifically to try and connect with the originals to kind of create like I've said it like the 3rd time now. Like it finishes the loop of all of the Star Wars movies that they've made. When C-3PO gets his memory erased, and you hear for the first time in probably like several movies where he says, you know, my name is C-3PO. Human cyborg relations, you know, like, and that's a nod in itself. You know, you have Palpatine again. It's one of those things where, you know, like, why is he in this? But I think that's again an attempt to try and close the loop and try and fit this in with the prequels and the originals. Because if you think about it, he is in all of them except for this saga here. And also the training, Rey's training, is a good parallel when she's in the jungle. It's a good parallel to when Luke was training in the originals on Dagobah. They're both in this like lush green jungle, and they're both trying to do the best they can without an actual
that's true.
You know, mentor. You know, you have Yoda in the originals, but like he's gone a little crazy at that point. He's old, you know, to the point where he dies just after Luke completes his training.
Right.
But yeah, and it's funny because I think that C-3PO specifically kind of embodies the theme of the entire movie of this one, of Rise of Skywalker, which I think is friendship. I think the entire movie is about friendship and about multiple times they say how the Empire wins by making us feel like we're alone. And so C-3PO making that sacrifice to get his memory erased, even though he doesn't want it, like he's actively against it. He decides, you know what, I have to do this because it's the only way for the Resistance to win. That sacrifice, I think, is a nod to the idea that, you know, friendship has to be stronger than evil. On top of that, you know, you have all of these new people that come into the movie at the very end, with the climax when all of the ships come in, they say, like, well, how they don't have a navy? How are they doing this? And they say they're just people.
It's just people.
It's just people, and I think that in itself is really the embodiment of the entire film. That you're never going to do something if you're alone, and it isn't until Kylo Ren realizes that he's not alone, that he has all these people that care about him, and that he's really in the fault. When his mother makes that sacrifice and dies for him, that he realizes that he's in the wrong, and that's the moment that it starts to shift. And it really, it's a metaphorical and literal death of his character, because he didn't die, but he died. If his mom hadn't given the Force to him, he would have died. Like, he got a lightsaber through the gut. And so it really is like the shedding of his old skin and moving into what his character is supposed to become, which is ultimately like a sacrifice for the greater good.
Right. For the Jedi, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Kylo Ren, obviously, is a full Force user, right? I mean, he's wielding a lightsaber, he's using the Force, like I was saying, he's stopping blaster shots. And then I guess in this one, Finn is also Force sensitive, I suppose, is kind of where they're going with that.
Yeah, so here's one of the questions that I had for you. I'll jump to that one. That was my next one. But yeah, they mentioned multiple times, and not just him, but pretty much all of the stormtroopers that were on that planet with Janna. On I don't think it was actually Endor, but it was one of Endor's moons. But she said that all the stormtroopers, her entire company, abandoned the First Order because they all had a feeling.
Yeah, it was all based on a feeling.
And so there's a theory that these were Force-sensitive kids who were forced to be stormtroopers, who then realized that they were in the wrong. And so, do you believe that Finn or the stormtroopers, all of them, or only a few of them, do you believe they're Force-sensitive, or is that something that people are just wanting? Because there's evidence that it says that Finn was Force-sensitive in the earlier films too.
I think I think that's exactly what they were going for. I think if you try to tell me that they weren't moving in the direction of saying that Finn and whoever else is Force sensitive, I mean, at the end of, gosh, I'm getting them all confused now. It's like they couldn't have named them a little more like indistinctly. But at the end of The Last Jedi, it was The Last Jedi where you see the kid who's like in the stable, like force the broom into his hand.
Yeah.
So it's not a secret that there's more people who are Force capable or have the Force with them somehow than just, these main characters that they've created for us. Mm-hmm. But again, they're trying to get us, that's supposed to be a detail that they're telling us about Finn so that we'll like buy into his character more. And they tell us with like an hour left in the last movie of the series. Like, where is that information in the Last Jedi or, the Rise of Skywalker? Where is that? Mm-hmm. They're missing that. And then they're trying to throw it at you at the end. And I don't know what they're expecting. Like when okay, Finn's kind of Force sensitive. Well, cool. But this is the last time we're ever going to see him. So it's awesome that this guy maybe is kind of Force sensitive, but like, thanks for telling us he had a feeling in the last movie of this series that we're even going to watch. It's like, who cares? It's over.
So that kind of leads into the next question I had for you, which is when they're sinking into the pit in the sand on the Aki planet. I can't remember what it's called, but the people are called the Aki. But they're sinking into the pit there, and he says, "Rey, I never told you," and then he doesn't get it out. He's not able to finish because they both sink. Do you think he was going to confess his love for her, or do you believe he was going to say, "Hey, by the way, I think I'm also Force sensitive"? Because there's people who see it both ways. There's people who want them to be together. And I'm one of the ones that actually sees a romantic connection between them many times throughout the movies. But then they kind of just get rid of it in The Last Jedi. And then in this movie, they just skip over what happened in The Last Jedi. They're like, hey, by the way, Rose kissed him, but, he got, like, we're not really sure what happened there. Because, the only interaction we see between Rose and Finn is, like, she comes up to him like, hey, if you guys get back, and he's like, when? And that's all we get. It's like this, like, hey, buddy, like, pat on the shoulder, and then they never interact again until the battle.
Yeah, I think, dude, this movie was so hard to keep up with relationship-wise. It was like a love, like, octagon going on in this movie, because you got Finn, who I thought from the get-go from the first one, was supposed to be the romantic interest of Rey.
Well, he even mentioned
it seemed like they were
in The Force Awakens. He says, like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Like, that's hinting.
Yeah, like, you got a boyfriend, cute boyfriend, what? Right, like, okay, so like they're into each other, which is great. Like, I like that. I like the chemistry. Then they, yeah, like you said, they kind of pull away from that. And then Rey kissing Kylo at the end, I thought that was so unnecessary.
Came out of
man.
nowhere.
I thought that was so unnecessary.
I mean,
and it's
I think it's
yeah,
sweet,
so
but it felt a little forced.
it felt a little, yeah, no pun intended. It felt a little bit forced for sure. They, I don't know, dude. And it's like, so they have this weird tension throughout the whole movie. Like, obviously we know they're kind of joined somehow. They're like seeing each other through these force visions, not even seeing, they're interacting with each other. Like they're like physically fighting and like ripping necklaces off each other and stuff. And like, so clearly they have some sort of a binding thing going on. And, you know, Palpatine says they're like a dyad in the force. Okay, fine. But I didn't really take it as it was like love, like these two were going to be in love, and I don't even know if that's what that kiss was supposed to be, like I love you kind of thing, or if it was just I don't know. I guess maybe that's what they were going for. But yeah, it's like, so Poe is supposed to be now all of a sudden interested in this, what was it Zuri, the chick that Poe's in love with. So he's supposed to be in love with her, and we have no backstory on her, could not care less about that character. Like, she shows up at the end. I mean, yeah, I guess, like, she would have been cool, you know, if we had seen her 3 movies ago, and now we're seeing her, like, a more developed version of her. But, like, she shows up at the end when, you know, everyone's making their little, there are more of us, and Lando comes, you know, popping on screen, and she's like, whoa, Spice Runner, and she comes flying out. It's like, okay, but, like, I'm not, like, I wasn't clapping. It's not like the whole audience was, like, cheering. It wasn't like, you know, Peter Parker swinging in Endgame at the end. Like, it wasn't like that, man. Like, you're not connected to these characters.
I cared more about the fact that Lando was back with the Millennium Falcon and all these people.
Exactly. I cared more about that ship. I cared more about the Millennium Falcon being there than I cared about half of those people that they had just introduced in this movie. Like, you're just not connected. I don't know. Maybe that's a question for you. Like, is it the physical aging of these characters in real life that may be kind of like turning people away from seeing them? Because I didn't feel like 3PO or R2 or Chewie were out of place in these films, but you don't notice aging on them. You don't notice any difference. They're kind of timeless in that sense. Like, I don't really know exactly how long a Wookiee's lifespan is. I'm pretty sure it's pretty long, if I remember correctly. And not like not like Yoda or anything like that, but like, you don't see them aging. You know, you see Mark Hamill aging. You don't really see Ian McDiarmid aging, because they pretty much had Palpatine looking like he was a million years old anyway. So he was cool. But you see Leia aging, and you see Han aging. And these, Lando, these characters that they're bringing in from the old movies, do you think that the physical aging of these characters is what's kind of turning some people off to them even being there? Because it's almost like they just seem a little out of place. I
think it's more about the being out of place in the story than it is about their physical appearance, because I wouldn't mind seeing Luke or Leia or Han if it served a real purpose to the story. But the only real purpose they served in the story was like, I fathered Ben Solo and I have to train Rey, when I think it would have been cool to like meet, like, Disney has set up throughout their series that there are other Jedi that are still alive that we have yet to see on screen. And I don't know if, I know you've seen some of the Clone Wars, but I've seen Rebels, Clone Wars, I've seen it all, and there's several, and the Fallen Order. You played that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you have Cal Kestis, which we assume is still alive, and also, interestingly enough, he is not one of the voices we hear at the end.
Yeah, I noticed that they drew in some voices at the end from some of the people from the Clone Wars, right?
And Rebels. And
Rebels.
Yeah, you have Kanan, who is, I believe, one of the coolest characters in the series, in the Star Wars world. So you bring him into this, you bring all these other characters, but you're still not willing to let go of these other characters that like really serve no purpose to the story other than like, hey, we're bringing them back. You know, I don't think it's
exactly
aging, but I think it's just the fact that, yeah, you're right, it does feel a little out of place, and they could do the same story with new characters.
It just feels unnecessary. It feels like they're bringing them in to hold on to the diehard Star Wars fans that probably don't even think they should be making these movies anyway. You know what I mean? And they're holding on to these characters, and they're trying to market these new people for us to love. But I have 2 qualms with a lot of movies nowadays, and you've heard me say this before, and anybody watching, if you keep watching some of these episodes, you're going to hear me say this now, and you're going to hear me say this again, because I think it's relevant. I think nowadays in a lot of these big movies, and this isn't the only problem, but I think they try to bring too many characters into a lot of these movies, and I think they also try to make them too funny. I think they're doing a serious disservice to these movies by trying to bring comedy in at some really stupid times.
Yeah, like when they're being
and
chased
they end up making
in this one.
Yeah, when they're being chased,
Like,
or
they fly
like, okay,
now.
dude, prime example. So Kylo Ren is hosting the like classic meeting at the table where you know he's going to force choke somebody who says something stupid. I don't know why anybody's even going to these round table meetings anymore. But dude, and like, okay, if you watch any of those meetings where Vader does that, where he does the force choke, nobody's laughing. Nobody's making jokes. That's not a funny moment in the movie. And yet in Rise of Skywalker, Kylo Ren walks in and he's got the Knights of Ren, which another set of characters that I'm not intimidated by. It's a bunch of goth dudes with like scimitars and stuff that don't even look that scary. Like she has a freaking lightsaber, dude. You got a piece of metal. Like, we're not scared of these characters. You don't see them do anything other than arrest Chewie, which is not like stormtroopers have done that multiple times throughout the saga.
And they're constantly being barked orders at, but they don't do anything. They follow them to all these planets and do nothing.
They do nothing, and we have no backstory on these people at all. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, Kylo Ren being one of the most underwhelming characters. But again, going back to my point, I think they try to make these movies too funny. Like, Kylo Ren goes into this meeting room, and he's talking about the spy, and freaking Jason Statham speaks up and gets slammed into the ceiling. Go back and watch that clip. That dude is literally a Jason Statham.
Okay, I thought you were saying 100%. He's literally the actor?
No, he's not actually in the movie, but he may as well be. Dude,
you should
the
have
guy
seen my
looks
face. I was
exactly
like,
like
wait,
him.
what?
You're like, wait, what? No, he says something stupid. I don't even know. And of course, like, they got to up the ante. Like, you can't just choke him anymore. He's got to fucking choke slam him into the ceiling. You know what I mean? But like,
got to make him seem more powerful.
Yeah, exactly. But they're doing Kylo Ren a serious disservice, in my opinion, when they make people laugh in his presence. Nobody's laughing around Vader. Nobody, except for maybe like Han Solo or somebody who you love because they're ballsy enough to do that. Dude, you're not going to get us to buy into Kylo Ren being this intimidating, scary guy when people are like laughing around him. And I think they do that throughout a lot of these movies, especially the new ones. If you watch them back, I think there's some parts in the movies that are actually really funny. I think there's a lot of dynamic between Finn and Poe that actually had me laughing. They're funny. And of course, C-3PO's hilarious in all these movies. That's just his character.
Babu Frig.
I also think... Dude, Babu Frig was one of my favorite. He's like one of the only people I'm okay with them adding in. Yeah. He's awesome. Yeah. But, you know, he's not an integral part. I mean, he's important to the story, but he's not like a main character of the story.
He supports
like,
the
Rey doesn't
story.
fall in love with him. You know what I mean? Like, he's not kissing Rey at the end of the movie. Like, it's a different kind of thing. But I think they try to bring too many characters in, and I think they try to make it too funny. And I think this film was no exception.
It just felt a little forced at times.
Yeah, I thought the humor seemed forced at times, and I thought that there were just so many characters in this that I couldn't even hardly tell you their names now, and we're supposed to be totally invested in them while we're watching this. I'm just not buying it. And I think you can say that to a lot of movies, and this is one of them.
So my last question, I guess, is what do you think the title The Rise of Skywalker is a reference to?
I mean, it's got to be a reference to the fact that Rey is kind of taking the helm as a Skywalker, right? I mean, she's not Skywalker by blood, but she was essentially not raised. She was raised in the desert, but she was essentially trained and in contact with a Skywalker, which I don't know. It seems almost a little bit disrespectful to Luke, the fact that she like comes in and does this, because Luke already killed Palpatine. Well, I guess technically Vader threw him off, right? Vader threw Palpatine off the thing, but Luke already like defeated Palpatine. He was the chosen one. He was supposed to be and this is nothing new. Like, a lot of people have said this, but Luke was supposed to be the guy that comes in and destroys Palpatine. So let Rey be the Jedi that comes in and defeats Snoke and this new enemy. But again, to bring Palpatine back in to try and grab some of the original fans of Star Wars, I think you end up just pissing people off. Yeah. Because now you've got her who, to go to your question, who I guess is supposed to be the new Skywalker. She's supposed to be the new main Jedi in all of this. She's now the one that actually defeats Palpatine. It's kind of a slap in the face to Luke a little bit. It's like, hey, you know that whole saga you went through and all those people who died and you got your hand cut off? Like, yeah, well, you didn't do it. You didn't finish the job. And now
messed up real bad.
Right, now here's this chick with like almost no training. Well, I guess a little bit at this point. She's been getting trained by Leia, so fair enough. But now here's somebody who, is going to come in and finish the job. Yeah. Do what you couldn't do. Sorry, dude. But yeah, I think The Rise of Skywalker, the title is just alluding to the fact that Rey is now the new Luke. Basically, she rises up at the end. I mean, do you think when you say that, do you think it could mean anything different?
I think that it's a reference to Kylo Ren's character, who's technically a Skywalker.
Ooh, yeah.
Because you have this character who's a fallen character. He's an enemy that was supposed to be a Jedi, but because of some really messed up circumstances and a big misunderstanding that they, for whatever reason, couldn't communicate through, he just turned dark and decided to cast away his name. But he is a Skywalker. He's got a Leia's blood in him. And so I think it's a reference to his character arc and his sacrifice for what's to become what Rey will eventually, I believe, create the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, and I guess that's supposed to be where we're going to go with it, but I don't think we're ever going to know because, like you said, I think they're going to... I think that's it. I think the Star Wars that we see now will either be something like The Mandalorian, where it's an independent kind of separate series.
With 0 lightsabers.
Or they're going to have to... Yeah, with 0...
no, that's a lie. There was a dark saber in there. Yeah.
Okay. That's another thing, man. The lightsaber, especially in this new trilogy, has got to be one of the most underutilized weapons in film ever. How many lightsaber battles do we even see in this movie? Like 2, maybe 3. Like, the bulb is not going to burn out on it, dude. Like, let them fight a little bit. Like, it's okay. Like, I feel like they are so hesitant to actually have cool battles between Jedi and Sith, and maybe it's because there's so few of them left. They can't afford to be like killing people off.
I think it's because they're afraid of not living up to the expectation of the Darth Maul battle, because that one was amazing.
Yeah. I thought at the end, the only time where I thought it would have been appropriate to have more characters brought back from the older movies was in the end when you're starting to hear the voices. I thought it would have been pretty cool, and I think it was a pretty straightforward thing for Palpatine to call on some of the cooler Sith. Like maybe if you had seen like Force Ghosts of Maul and Dooku and some of these Sith that are just a little bit more like intense, I think that would have been pretty cool to at least see.
Yeah.
Like you're going to bring, you've already got Luke in this, and you're going to bring the voices of everybody, you know what I mean? You're going to bring the voices of Vader and Anakin, well, same person, but, young Anakin and then Vader and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. You're bringing all these people into this. Why not show us some Force Ghost of like Darth Maul? And if you're scared to bring him into it, because you think you're not going to do justice, then what do you think is going on with all these other characters that you're bringing back into this movie? Because I think it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're not really doing these characters justice in these movies, but you're bringing them in. Why not bring in the characters that I think people want to see a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
But, hey. So, The Rise of Skywalker, it got a 52% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really?
And it got an 86% from the audience score. So, I am not a huge fan of Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think it's always spot on. But so what would you give it from a critic perspective? And then I'll tell you what I would give it, I suppose, as just a fan of the films.
I like the use of color. I think the cinematography was great. There were some epic like shots. When you see Kylo Ren approaching the big temple, the symmetry of that, the use of the colors of his lightsaber versus the contrasting, dark backgrounds and stuff. The cinematography, I think, was great, which is expected, with a director like him. The story was a little lacking. It felt a little forced at times. Again, the use of the dagger, like why use the Death Star as the marking point, as the X marks? It could fall at any point, sink into the ocean. The dagger becomes useless. The holocrons last. You could have easily changed that. Right. It just felt a little too fortuitous. The Knights of Ren were a bad guy. Like one of the rules in filmmaking is if you're gonna show a gun in a film, you pull the trigger at some point. And I feel like they missed that. They didn't pull the trigger on the Knights of Ren in any of the films, even though they were supposed to be these incredible knights. I didn't like the use of the Final Order. Like, come up with a better name. Like, I didn't like that. Like,
yeah.
Other than that, the comedy was a little forced. Overall, the story was enough for it to be entertaining. It was enough for it to be Star Wars. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say that it's somewhere in between a strong 7.5 and an 8 for me. That's
I'm actually, I'm impressed to hear you say that. I thought you were going to come in a little bit lower, but I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And me, just as a fan, I liked this movie, but again, when you watch it back, you almost feel like you're watching this movie for the last 30, 40 minutes. And it may not even be quite that long. You're watching this movie to see Palpatine blast lightning into the sky and everything slows down and it's visually insane. And I thought visually this was an incrable movie. Everybody
and that's the
cool,
only
the
reason I
characters
gave
look
it
cool.
the score that I did, because if the directing had been off, if the acting was bad, because there are some touching moments, especially when Leia dies, and just even though there's no lines from him, Chewie falling to his knees and the agony in his cry, powerful. Dude, like, I mean, it hurts. So
it was powerful.
It's there were good moments in the movie. It does fit into the universe, but it just doesn't feel like the Star Wars movie that they wanted it to be, and that's the only reason that I give it a little lower of a score.
Yeah, and it probably wasn't the Star Wars movie that Abrams wanted it to be. I mean, he made some bold moves just to get it back on his tracks with this. I mean, Snoke's dead now, so there's a character that was introduced and supposed to be the villain. Like, that's a huge thing in a movie, man, to take the main villain and just say, no, they're dead.
Yeah,
sorry,
out of nowhere.
Like, figure something else out. Yeah, like, that's intense. So now he's almost forced to create loopholes in the story by trying to bring somebody back.
And I think that's the real disservice to the entire trilogy is that you had different directors who did not agree. The writing was off, and so you have this film that was as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah, I agree. I think watching it again, it kind of has Endgame syndrome where you kind of are getting through the whole movie just because the ending is so good and so intense. And I liked the movie. I thought there were some really cool parts in the movie. I thought the acting from a lot of the main characters was phenomenal. I think Adam Driver is actually an incredible actor. I thought Daisy Ridley did a phenomenal job. And I thought a lot of the characters, Poe, Finn, did really well. I thought the lines for C-3PO were funny, and I enjoyed it. I definitely remember coming out of theaters immediately thinking, this was the best of the three. And even after watching it again, I still think it was the best of the three. And I liked it. So as just someone who's watching this because it's a Star Wars movie and trying to kind of ignore the loopholes in it, I'm going to give this movie a 7. I'm going to give this movie a 7. I liked it. It had an awesome ending. Maybe the ending bumps it up to an 8. It just depends on how much you're willing to look past some of the other stuff.
I mean, the climax has that emotion to it.
Right.
To see, like, Poe in this moment of despair where he's like, I let everybody down. I thought we were going to have something here. We were probably going to lose. He's watching all of his friends get shot down, and then to just see that beautiful imagery of all of those ships. I mean, my jaw dropped in the theater. That was absolutely stunning to see that many ships just appear out of hyperspace. I was like grabbing the edge of my seat at that time. But if that's all the movie has going for it, then it's there's something missing. So
yeah, I'm gonna stick with my gut and give it a 7. And some people are gonna love that, some people are gonna hate that, but it is what it is. So comment down below if you're still with us. Let us know what you would give it out of a scale of 1 to 10, and if you guys loved it or hated it. And that's it. It's on Disney Plus again, so go watch it. We're all stuck at home anyway, so there's nothing better to do. Chris, you got anything else for the Rise of Skywalker?
No. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'll throw that at the end. I love Star Wars, and I don't feel like I wasted my money, if that's any.
Yeah.
So I mean that's all I got for that.
It was a good movie. Whew. All right.
Now we're moving on to
changing pace.
Now I'm assuming we're going to talk about the Lighthouse here.
Let's talk about the Lighthouse. Yeah, let's talk about the Lighthouse.
I remember you picked that movie. I looked it up and I was like, okay, psychological horror. It's a movie about some guys who are stuck in a lighthouse. Okay, there's going to be something weird. I thought it would be something like. Honestly, there's nothing I can relate it to. This movie is so unique. But I will say that immediately I was drawn in. I had no idea it was black and white. I saw black and white on the poster. I saw black and white images, but I thought that was, I don't know, some sort of like marketing thing. I didn't realize the entire movie
just to get
was
you
shot
interested in the movie.
Let me get my notes for this one.
This movie is insane. So this movie, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a psychological horror is how it's technically defined. And perhaps I should have looked into more of exactly what that is, more so than when I went into it. So this one is on Amazon Prime, if you have it. We'll get into whether I would recommend this movie or not, or whether you would, but it's very intense. So this movie, basically, you're watching.
You got Robert
I don't
Pattinson.
know the exact. Yeah, you got Robert
and
Pattinson, You got Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and I knew very little about this movie coming into it. I had actually heard good things from some of my friends who like scary movies a little better. I assumed it was going to be pretty scary.
Yeah, same.
but I was so expecting it to be
like jump scares,
like a traditional, like a traditional scary movie where like they're under attack from like some freaking demon squid, or from like, you know, there's mer people that are coming out of the water and trying to get in their cabin and they're fighting them off. I did not think it was going to be so much of just them running from themselves almost, or from each other, as much as it was. But gosh, this was intense. So this was probably set in what, the 1800s?
I believe
think they were
it's
like
the
referencing
late 1800s or early 1900s. But I'm pretty sure it's like
I think
1870s, 1880s.
Yeah. And this movie's completely in black and white from beginning to end.
Yeah, so I took a lot of film classes where we had to study specifically really old films. And you notice it immediately that it's shot in a different aspect ratio. It's shot almost in a perfect square. I can't remember what the exact ratio, but it's basically a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a square. And so the sides of the screen are black, whereas modern films, we shoot in a much thinner, wider ratio, because it comes from like Western films. They were one of the first films to do that because they wanted to show the vastness and the epicness of the expanse of the Wild West. And so to show it wide kind of draws viewers in more and shows more of the landscape. And so you get a lot more of that openness. But a film like this, where you're literally stuck in a lighthouse the entire time, is this one setting, I think it's genius because you feel claustrophobic. You're watching this and you feel enclosed in with them because you're not used to this.
You feel the space. Yeah. You definitely feel the space. You do.
So let's talk about the cinematography for a second. Let's forego the writing and what it means and all that. Let's talk about the cinematography. There's a theory that's called the invisible director, the invisible hand. It's got a bunch of different names. The idea is that the director is not noticed. You don't see the intent. It's as natural as it could possibly be. And I think The Lighthouse is as far away from that as possible. Every shot is intently placed. Every single shot has, it's almost like a comic book, it very much feels like an old-fashioned film in that every single shot is a composed piece of art. And I thought it was very beautifully shot. I thought the use of the dark, when you don't have the color and all you have is the dark and the light, it creates a different feeling, it creates a different image. And as a director, you have to look at different things. It's like painting in black and white versus painting, with color. You're having to focus on value versus color and the emotion that the black and white, gives to you as a viewer. So obviously with a film like this, most of it was black. It's very dark. What did you think of the cinematography? I thought it was very masterfully done. I thought it was beautiful.
I thought it was obviously different.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at a film in black and white. I can't even tell you the last time I watched a black and white film. It was probably like the beginning of Schindler's List in school when, they're showing you that. I think that other than that, I cannot remember the last time I watched a black and white. And of course that one's not all black and white,
mm-hmm.
but I can't tell you the last time I watched a black and white film. It's been a long time. But
does that, as a viewer, does that take you out of the film?
Well, I think the problem with this one is you got to remember, to those of you who have seen it or those of you who haven't, this entire film takes place, as Chris was saying, in a maybe 15 by 15 shed or in a lighthouse, which I don't know if any of the viewers live by the coast or have ever been in like one of those historic lighthouse things where you can walk up. It's so claustrophobic mm-hmm. and there's no room at all. So you're basically seeing the same 3, maybe 4 settings for the entire movie. Now, it's not an extremely, other than the outside, it's not an extremely long movie, but it's also not, it's not a little short film. It's not a 20-minute film. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I thought it was a different and an interesting change to be filming a black and white movie. But I started feeling like towards maybe about the halfway point, I almost felt like I could have just closed my eyes and listened to this movie and probably have understood and have kind of felt the same way about it coming out of it, because you're not really like the visual. It sets up the set, like the scenery, and it sets up the feeling and the anxiety and the claustrophobia so well. Mm-hmm. But then nothing really changes. The whole movie kind of takes place on that little rock. Mm-hmm. And so by like halfway through, I'm like, okay, I get it. They're living in squalor. It's old. They're using old stuff. It started to feel like I was reading a book. because
Yeah,
it
I
was
can
like
see
the
that.
visual wasn't doing anything for me. And, I appreciated it, not like you do, obviously. Like, I didn't know that about, like, the square aspect ratio, but I appreciated the difference of having a film that was put in black and white. But it started to lose me like halfway through because I was just like, oh my God. And maybe that was what they wanted. Maybe they wanted me to feel like I just wanted to get out or get off that island or move away. And that's how the characters felt too. And if so, mission accomplished.
Well,
because
the
like
film
halfway
started to
through
lose
that
me
movie.
too, about halfway through, but mostly because I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Like,
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it too. That was part of it too. This film made me feel stupid. I watched this film and it made me feel dumb because I kind of felt like the whole time this was either referencing a book that I haven't read or an old film that I haven't seen or some story about like sea folklore that I've never heard. And it just made me feel like, okay, as just like a person just living in like a normal society who's not super well versed on like old poetry or like old stories that maybe this was based off of, I knew it was. I looked into it a little bit, and so I guess there's a Lighthouse story that Edgar Allan Poe wrote. I've never read that.
Yeah.
So for me, this movie was just it lost me because I was just kind of like, it feels like I'm supposed to be like appreciating a reference to something that I don't understand.
so was it the dialogue or was it the actual context? Because the dialogue is also
Man,
very
yeah.
old-fashioned.
It is. And look, you got Willem Dafoe, who, for all intents and purposes, looks like the prom king at like a high school for cavemen. Like, this dude looks like the most handsome Neanderthal that has ever walked the earth, but he is a phenomenal actor. Like, he's got kind of a look to him, but a phenomenal actor. And so, you kind of get into it because here's this kind of kooky looking dude and he's talking an old folk talk, an old 1800s talk. I think it all started to lose me, to be honest with you. And again, I don't even know if maybe it's fair for us to review this because I'm sure it was alluding to things that are over my head or I'm not well versed in. But I was marketed this movie in the theaters. It was marketed to me for everything else that I was seeing. And here I am thinking this is going to be, I guess I kind of thought it was going to be a psychological thriller. And it was more so like an old school horror,
Right.
but
Yeah,
take
absolutely.
away the like goofy monster. There's no creature from the Black Lagoon. It was just their own psyche that started to just kind of break and drive them mad.
Yeah.
And if you like that kind of thing, a very dense movie with a lot of character backstory, here's kind of the opposite where now you're getting like really into these characters and there's two of them. Three if you count like the mermaid chick, which I don't. She's not really like a character. She's just like a symbol. But it started to lose me, I think, because of all of it. It started to lose me because visually, I was getting bored. Like, I can understand as a critic that you might like the look of that movie and how it's different, and that's fine. But I was bored. I was bored of it halfway through. I was bored of the visual. I wanted to see something in color. I was bored of the setting. I was tired of that house or them just being drunk. I felt like this whole movie was just you're watching two guys get hammered and go crazy.
Yeah.
And if that sounds interesting to you and you haven't seen it yet, then go ahead. But both the dialogue and the visual, to be honest, lost me about halfway through. I caught myself pausing it a couple times to see how much time was left. And I didn't do that in Rise of Skywalker. And if it hadn't been for the fact that we knew we were going to review this in this podcast for everybody else, I don't know 100% I would have made it through. I'm not entirely sure.
No, I mean, that's completely fair. I think it's different for me because I am seeing it through the eyes of a director. And so I'm seeing it through, I'm seeing the process that it took for them to create the images, because the very first time you see the two of them together, you're seeing the two beds and they're divided by this wall or a pole. I'm not sure what it was, but like the image is a square that's divided down the center with one of them on each side. And the symbolism in that is there's going to be tension. Like that opening shot really foreshadows what's going to come. There's a couple moments where they're getting angry with each other and you see their shadows behind them, and like the shadows get more and more, like they get bigger as the film goes on. And I thought that was very good it did a good job at foreshadowing, again, the ending of the film, if that makes sense at all, because the ending is one of those where you're not really quite sure what's happening. And I noticed that there's a definite tonal shift in the film right after he beats the living shit out of that gull.
Yeah, he destroys that
Yeah.
seagull. So viewer beware. There's some animal abuse in this movie. I don't think that was a real bird. If it was already dead.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
it
they're not
wasn't.
going to have.
I don't think it was.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
I'm pretty sure PETA would say something about that.
So for you, The Lighthouse just wasn't. It didn't hold your attention enough.
It definitely didn't. No, I would say about halfway through, and both the dialogue and the visual it got old. They were talking about the same kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing the same things. I know we were kind of just watching these guys delve into, I guess, insanity, but yeah, they lost me, man. They lost me about halfway through.
So I noticed that alcohol kind of plays a little bit of symbolism in the film, and a lot of symbolism, really. And you see, at first, Robert Pattinson's character, what was it, Wilson? I have it written here. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was
Ephraim
Winslow at the beginning. Ephraim Winslow, and then it turns into Thomas Howard.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Ephraim Winslow, first time he gets offered alcohol, he says no. And this is the moment, when we're seeing him, he seems like a sane person. Seems completely normal. He seems quiet and reserved, but he refuses the alcohol because it's against regulation. The second time he's offered alcohol, he takes a little sip. And at this point, he's already starting to kind of lose his mind a little bit because he's tired of being here with this old guy. And then every time we see alcohol from then on, all the way up until the point where they're guzzling this, his sanity is just out the window by that point. So, there's a shot where he's getting coal, and the coal is just covered in water, and it's just the bottle is sitting in the wheelbarrow as he's taking it back, and so the alcohol is just front and center in the beginning, or at the forefront of the shot, and the lighthouse in the back. So I guess my question is, do you think that the alcohol played some sort of key in them losing their sanity, or is it a symbol of their sanity? Are they even insane? There's so much imagery that we see there that we're not sure what's real and what's not.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like Shutter Island, where at the end of it, they're trying to play with your rationality. Is like, Robert Pattinson's character is trying to escape, and then Willem Dafoe's character comes up and breaks the boat with an axe. But then he tells them when they get back that Robert Pattinson was the one that broke the boat and chased him. And it's like your whole perception is just getting tested in this. And I think, it's the 1800s. It's disgusting. Like, dude, they got, cans basically that they're using the bathroom in. He gets covered in it when he's trying to go throw it out. Mm-hmm. They're stuck on a freaking island with each other for, I don't even remember how long they were supposed to be on there. Like
4 weeks supposed to be.
4 weeks. Yeah, and then it turned into way longer, I suppose, or it just ended or whatever.
We're not really sure.
I think anybody would go insane. And I think it was like, is that whole movie just supposed to be them getting pent up and bored on that island? Like, that's why I felt like this movie made me feel dumb, man, because it's like, what are we, like,
you're
what,
not
what
alone
are we
there,
doing?
man. You're not alone. And
yeah.
I did research after the fact. So there's a lot of stuff. I made notes galore as far as like the story that I did not understand certain things. But I was more questioning, like, throughout the film, at first you're with Robert Pattinson. You're on his side. You're like, okay, there's no way this guy's crazy. He's acting normal. The old guy's clearly a kook. But then as the film goes on, you start to question whether we're seeing what is going on in Winslow's mind, and the what's his name, Tom, the old guy, whether or not he is the one who's actually sane, because he flips the switch on us a couple times throughout the movie, where Winslow says that he's been waiting for like 24 hours for this boat to arrive, and then Tom tells him, dude, it's been weeks. It's been weeks and you've been getting violent with me, and then you're like, right. We as viewers didn't see that. So we're not aware that that's happened, but the way he's acting makes you question whether or not he's telling the truth. So you're not sure which character to side with. Is the old guy crazy, or has Ephraim been crazy this entire time and we're just unaware of it? And then it flips back and forth, because then Tom starts to act kind of like a villain, And then we're on Ephraim's side and like, no, like obviously Tom is playing tricks on him. You know, he really did see something at the top of the lighthouse, and it's making him go crazy. But then it flips it again, and you're just not sure where to go. You know, you're not sure what to think about either of these characters. And I think it's intentional, because I think it's meant to make you question your own sanity, like you said, your own rationality, because you're not sure of what's going on in the film. So I guess my question for you, do you think there was something at the top of the lighthouse? Because we saw, for those of the viewers who have seen it, we did see for a moment where he's looking up, and it's one of the only moments that the film uses sound to kind of portray the intensity of the emotion.
Yeah, that like intense muted
and the
scream.
Tentacle. Well, no, not even then yet. Yeah. The first time before he's even made it to the top.
Oh, when he sees him up there, like masturbating or whatever.
Was he masturbating? I mean, I'm not sure.
I think. I don't know. The movie, honestly, it's a pretty disgusting movie.
It is,
through and through. The whole thing is nasty.
Yeah,
I think he was. Shocking. I have no idea. Maybe it's just, again, like maybe we're supposed to be referencing that he's an octopus. I mean, like, dude, I don't know. This is why I feel like this movie makes me feel dumb, because I kind of finished it and I just have no idea what I even watched.
So, I did a little research. Because when he gets angry, and it's such a bizarre moment, because he's angry. Tom, the old guy, is angry at Winslow because he didn't like his cooking. They're drunk as shit at this point, but he's angry because he didn't like his cooking, and so he gets up, and you see the shadow rise over him, and he starts cursing him. He puts this like old sailor's curse on him, and he references a few things. He references Prometheus, and he references Proteus, and I know Prometheus. I'm really big on Greek mythology, but I do not know Proteus. So after the film was over, I started doing some research. Now, I think this will be interesting for you, and it'll kind of like maybe connect a few of the dots. Prometheus, if you're not aware, Danny, and if any of the viewers are not, this is the god that climbed Mount Olympus, and he loved humans. He saw them as kind of like something that needed to be nurtured. So he climbed Mount Olympus against the gods' wills, and stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. That's where we get fire from, according to Greek mythology, is that Prometheus stole it for us to give it to us to protect ourselves, to harness the power of fire. As vengeance, Zeus had him tied to a mountain. He chained him to a mountain, and every day a crow, or a bird, I think it was a crow, but a bird of some kind will eat his liver. And at night, the liver and the wound will close up, and the next day it'll start again. So basically he is perpetually stuck on this mountain, being eaten by this crow every day, and at night it grows back, and the next morning he has to go through it again. So you have that. Proteus is I believe Greek mythology, but he is also known as the Old Man of the Sea, and he's a trickster, and he likes to hoard information for himself. So you can see parallels between the two characters, where Proteus is Tom, the old guy, who is hoarding whatever is up at the lighthouse for himself, possibly playing tricks on Winslow's mind. And then you have Prometheus, which is paralleled in Winslow's story, in that he sees something that he deserves, and so he figuratively and literally climbs Mount Olympus. He climbs to the top of the lighthouse and takes whatever is up there for himself, and ultimately, at the end of the film, it leads to his death.
Right, he's getting eaten by that bird.
Yeah.
At the end, it's eating his liver.
Which, just as a note, that whole scene where you have this like monologue. I mean, it's a monologue where he is just cursing him like an old sailor's speak. It's so hard to follow, but it's really funny in that little moment, because at the end, after he curses him, I love that Ephraim just kind of goes, "Fine, I like your cooking."
Right.
Like it's just I couldn't help but laugh at that. I thought it was just great to have this like shift in emotion where. It's, it goes from them being weirdly funny together, they're drunk and they're just, being weirdos and oddballs. And then it just shifts, all of a sudden he's angry, like it's probably the alcoholism, who knows. And then it just goes back to being funny again. It's definitely like that whole scene is a little bit of a roller coaster. Excuse me. But, so I guess ultimately it comes down to like, do you think there was something supernatural there, or is that all psychological?
I don't know, man. And that's the thing. Like, I think what you just described with Prometheus and Proteus, if that interested you, like it interested me, but if basically watching a movie where everything is alluding to something else. If that kind of thing interests you, then go ahead and watch The Lighthouse, because you'll probably be able to derive a lot from it. Maybe you'll definitely derive what we were just talking about, because that's exactly what happened. It was clearly a Proteus and Promethean kind of reference, or Prometheus reference. But I think that these guys were going insane. I think that they were going insane. I think that this is kind of an idea of these old sailors' tales, don't mess with the goals, and these sirens or harpies or whatever they're supposed to be that appears in the movie, and they're deadly, and it just, to me, I don't think you're supposed to know. I don't think you're supposed to be able to tell if there was anything supernatural going on, or if they were just going insane. And I think that's kind of the point of that movie, I suppose. I think that's kind of what they were going for.
To make you think.
To make you think. And to be honest, it made me think that I'll probably never watch that one again. And
afterwards, I had to watch something lighthearted. Like, I think I put on Finding Dory. I mean, it's an intense movie. It really is. And I feel like I can't finish up this movie if we're not going to talk about The Mermaid. What in the world? I mean,
no, I'm having a weird mental vision. Was The Mermaid cut? Was that in color, or was that in black and white too?
I'm pretty sure
Did
it was
we
black
get
and
any
white.
color? Okay, it was all black and white. I don't know why.
I think I would have noticed it, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I can't remember if we got any flashbacks in color in that movie. I don't think we did. I'm not going to rewatch it to find out, but I don't think that we did get any of those flashbacks.
Do you think there was a mermaid?
I think that they were,
because we know that there was the little the trinket that he had.
Right, the guy before him, he had referenced that he went insane thinking about mermaids.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was a mermaid, and I guess maybe if you go by that path,
maybe there was a monster.
maybe we
up
are
at the
supposed
top.
to believe that. Yeah. Maybe we are supposed to believe that this is something supernatural going on, and they were cursed. Maybe because he killed the gull, which is supposed to be the soul of a dead sailor. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just, I think you can take from this movie what you want to take from it, but I think that it was expertly filmed, and I think that I don't know. This movie had a lot going against it, ratings-wise, from the beginning. It's very different. It's black and white, which immediately is going to turn it's black and white, which means it's going to throw a lot of people off right away. There's two characters in this movie. Keep that in mind. The cast is two people. It's Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. So
except for the small cameos that a couple actors make. I mean, overall the entire script is maybe four people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, very few people, other than maybe flashbacks or something. But it had a lot going against it for anybody to really say that they loved that movie. It was very different. It was definitely a bold move to try and film that. I think it's a critic's movie. I think it's a movie meant to have discussion about. I think it's a movie meant to analyze and talk about whether, it's Inception, it's Shutter Island. Does the top stop spinning or not? Are they in a dream or not? It was Leonardo DiCaprio actually crazy or not? It could go either way. It's you can watch it and you can derive from it what you will. I think that this was a movie for people that really like to think. You can't turn your brain off and watch this one. It's gonna go completely over your head.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up with because, again, it felt like I was reading a book.
Yeah.
It was black and white. The scenery doesn't change. You're looking at the same two people. Their appearance doesn't change. It's just their behavior, and so you may as well close your eyes and watch this movie once you get kind of the first 20 minutes in, because it's all going to be basically the same after that. I don't know. This one I didn't love, but Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score was a 90%, which doesn't surprise me, and the audience score was a 72% is what I got. So what did you think watching this one from kind of a critic's point of view? How'd you like it?
So again, cinematography, which is what I love, with my background in my film studies. Cinematography, I thought, was fantastic. I think it is up to par with some of the best films out there from back in the day, like Citizen Kane, Casablanca, those iconic films. I think if this movie had been made back then, although it wouldn't have been received the same way because of some of the imagery, I think this movie is up to par with the masters as far as the directing of the photography of the entire thing, which is why I liked it so much, because visually I thought it was stunning. There was a lot of good things going for it as far as the camera work. The writing, it was difficult to follow. I tend to be really good at following films that have that kind of speech. I thought Willem Dafoe did an amazing job talking like a sailor, like amazing. I was very
he's
sold
phenomenal.
on his
He's
acting
phenomenal.
there. They both did a great
The
job.
most
with their
talented,
acting.
the most talented caveman of all time.
So the writing itself was bizarre. Like I said, it's hard to follow because you're not sure who to believe, and I think that kind of works against the film. But I think the film itself is intended to be an avant-garde piece. I think it's an art piece. It's not exactly a movie that you're going to go and see, with a family. It's one of those movies that is intended for people who are probably going to write a paper on it. It's intended for thinkers, and I think that's really the person that it's going to find a niche with, and potentially be talked about in film classes, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now. Sound is a little hard to talk about because there really isn't much sound in the film except for the incessant foghorn that you hear throughout the film, and it is so annoying. Like, and in that's how it's supposed to be, because you even see Ephraim, the first time he hears it, he kind of does this like little neck thing where he's like, he immediately doesn't like the foghorn. And so I think there's some symbolism there in that the foghorn is supposed to increase the intensity of the film, or the tension. I think there's definitely some symbolism there, but overall, I give the movie 75. So a 7.5 out of 10, just because of the masterful cinematography, and that I like that it makes you think, and there's references there that aren't easy to pick up on, and I don't think that every film should be easy. So I give it. I don't agree with like the 90-something% that Rotten Tomatoes gave it. I think that's the score weighing heavily on one side than the other. Probably critics. But 7.5, maybe closer to 8 stars, because it's one of those films that I could easily write a 10-page paper on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reasons that you liked it, to be honest, are probably the reasons I didn't. Mm-hmm. I'm just not interested in watching a movie that and of course somebody's going to say, yeah, a movie that you have to actually think, you just want to watch something mindless. And not necessarily. I like a good psychological movie. I like a psychological thriller. I just kind of felt like I was waiting for something to happen for this whole movie, and I never really got there.
Yeah.
It kind of just was a flat plateau. I didn't love it. Honestly, I think, again, there's stuff that probably went over my head, and there's going to be some people that are going to tell me, some viewers that are going to listen to this and say, well, you just can't appreciate it, and that's probably true. But again, I saw trailers for this movie just like anybody else. I didn't seek it out. It was a popular movie on Amazon Prime, and I watched it. I would probably give this one a 5. I appreciate the cinematography, and Willem Dafoe, Robert Pattinson, phenomenal acting. Mm-hmm. I mean, Willem Dafoe's incredible always, and Robert Pattinson here, if you want a good kind of pre-show of what your Batman is going to be, then go check him out, because he's an interesting character in this, but he's definitely intense and dark. It was a little too much for me. I wouldn't really recommend this one, so I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10, and that's that. So anybody viewing, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. Better, worse.
I also would love to know what some of our viewers' thoughts are on what the film was meant to be. There's symbolism there in the seagulls. There's symbolism in the foghorn. What the hell did he see inside that? Like, that thing opened up by itself at the end. Like, I just want to know what people think. Maybe there's better theories out there. I don't know, because it's one of those. I tend to be very good at picking up on cues that films give and things like that. And this is one of those films where I had absolutely zero idea what to think at the end. So yeah, I would love to hear what other people's opinions are. So
cool. So The Lighthouse, you heard it from us. If you haven't seen it, there you go. Now you can make your decision. If you have seen it, like you said, let us know what you think. And on to movie number 3 out of 3, the last one up for today, Marriage Story.
I spelled it wrong on here. I forgot the E at the end. Marriage.
Yeah. The Marriage Story.
Yeah, so Marriage Story. So another shift in tone as far as like the movies we had to watch. Before I say anything, the acting is absolutely fantastic.
Of course.
I think it is. I was worried that I would see Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, and for like the first 2 minutes, I couldn't get past the how easy it is to pick his voice out. He just has one of those deep, voices that is so easy to hear, and you just immediately know who it is. But after about 2 minutes, I got past that, and I really was sold on his character as a father figure as opposed to Kylo Ren.
He's a phenomenal actor, man.
Yeah.
He's a phenomenal actor. He's got some range, definitely.
So the cinematography of the film, this is one of those films where you don't notice the director. And that's a very natural, it's a very artistic and independent film way of doing things. Like J.J. Abrams directs a movie, and you've got lens flares, you have sweeping motions, you have explosions. You're very aware of the intent of the director. Whereas with this film, I don't know if you noticed it, but there were several shots, especially when Scarlett Johansson's character is doing a couple monologues, and the entire sequence is almost one shot. It cuts away for a moment, and then it cuts back to her, but it's the same shot. Like, you're not aware that there was one camera rolling the entire time she was talking. And that is something that independent films do, and it could be a budget thing, it could be an artistic choice, but the cinematography of the film was very subtle. And the use of framing, they're arguing at one point, and you see Adam Driver's character Charlie in the back of the house, but he's framed just perfectly in the doorway, kind of squeezed in this tiny little space, and she's in the forefront, yelling at him. So it makes her feel powerful, makes her feel large, while he's in the back in this tiny confined space. And so you feel for his character, even though throughout the movie you can see both of their sides. So the cinematography, I thought, was really well done in a way that wasn't overt, and we as viewers couldn't tell, unless you're looking for that kind of thing. We weren't really sure where the camera was moving, how many cameras there were, where other movies you can tell. Let's hear your side. What did you think of this movie? Like, which character did you side with?
Yeah, man, this movie's been getting a lot of hype lately. Mm-hmm. Like, people have been talking about it. It's a popular movie on Netflix right now. If you haven't seen it, I'll go ahead and let you know I would recommend it. It's very, if I had to pick one word to describe this movie, it would probably be real. This was a very real feeling movie. If you don't know, most of you have probably seen it. If you don't know and you're interested, basically this movie follow Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's characters going through a divorce when they have a young kid. And it's basically, it's sobering. And, I am married. I've only been married for about a year, so, here's my expertise on this, but this will give you a scary look at exactly what a divorce is like. Some people, of course, have been through that themselves and probably related very heavily to this, and that may be why this movie was so popular. But it's very real. And this movie, I could kind of see from a critic's point of view and also from just a filmmaker's point of view why it was so popular. Because I noticed one thing about this movie, that all the scenery, the houses they chose, the cars they were driving, the offices they were in, it was like they just picked out of a hat and said, take me to a random office that's actually being used somewhere, and we'll use that to film. I mean, you're looking at imperfections in all the scenery that give it that just really real feeling. I mean, you feel like these are two married people going through a divorce. You completely get sucked into the fact that it's actually going on. I completely forgot about the fact that it was Kylo Ren after, like you said, after about 5 minutes. You don't feel that. And this is even coming off of just watching the Star Wars movies. But the acting is phenomenal. Adam Driver is an incredibly good actor. So is Scarlett Johansson. They have a remarkable amount of chemistry.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's actually the two of them or just a nod to their acting ability, but they have a lot of chemistry. This movie, to me, almost felt like it walked the border or walked the line of being like a documentary following the lives of two people going through a divorce.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's sobering. As real as it is, it's sobering. And
not to say, there are funny parts in it. There's moments of it that are very beautiful, but you're right. It does feel very much like a documentary.
Absolutely. And whose side am I on? I don't think either one. It's like nobody wins in that situation. Like, you just kind of feel bad for the kid, and you feel bad for Scarlett Johansson, and you feel bad for Adam Driver. obviously at the beginning you're siding with Scarlett Johansson entirely. I mean, Adam Driver's character didn't appreciate her in that relationship at all. He, just basically she was just an extension of him, and she didn't want to be that, and so she broke away from that, rightfully so. And it's hard because that's the kind of situation where I'd imagine if there was no kid, it's so much of an easier situation to deal with. But you're looking at a married couple that has a kid, and that's a very real thing. And I'm sure most of the viewers, not most of, but a lot of the viewers who have been through that could really relate to that, because I think they probably, I've never been through a divorce, but I think they probably hit the nail right on the head with that one. I think it was really accurate.
It's funny because you say that from the beginning you're on her side, and it's funny because I was on his side from the beginning.
Really?
Yeah, where I mean, I was seeing it from both of their points of view, and more times than not I was seeing it through the kid's point of view, but I couldn't imagine the things that he had to go through. Like he literally had to go back and forth across the country just to try and hold on to the chance of being able to see his kid. And I mean, obviously he's a flawed character. He cheated on his wife, and that's something that comes up multiple times in the film. And then her character is also flawed in the sense that she has a lack of emotional connection. She doesn't. I guess I'm not even sure what the word I would use for her character is, but she has. To me, she feels like an actress who lost her chance to be famous and is unwilling to give up her dream in the face of the fact that she is now going through this very difficult time with her family. And so it's weird because it is very visceral. Like you're seeing both of them go through some psychological trauma, both of them as they're trying to, fight through lawyers. And it's funny because you end up seeing their entire conversation and their entire life is being spoken at through lawyers at one point. They're not even arguing with each other. The lawyers are arguing for them. And it's bizarre to me because it, I think, is a statement on the judicial system in the United States. But at the same time, I kind of feel like the lawyers in some way are a symbol for the person on the outside, the selfish person, that is it wants to say so much and wants to, it's that well, I deserve this and I deserve this, while at the same time we're seeing them in their true emotion, in that, they obviously, neither of them wants this, neither of them is willing to admit that they're at fault. But you're seeing that almost childlike inside the inner child of them as they're defeated. I mean, that's what they are. And it's
this is a really provocative film. I was watching this with my wife, and we were just sitting down eating dinner and watching this one, and by the end of it, we're having a we're having a full-on debate about the imperfections of the divorce system going through the courts, and how is it sexist and is it fair. And honestly, at first when I was watching this, I was like, man, I would not recommend anybody watches this movie with their partner. But actually, I completely feel the opposite way. I would strongly recommend if you're in a relationship of some kind, this is a really interesting movie to watch, because you see how harsh it is, and you see that really, it's funny that you bring up the lawyers, but really I feel like the only people that win in these kind of situations are the lawyers. They're both of these parties, Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, they're out of tens of thousands of dollars. That money could have been going to do a college education fund for their kid or anything else. It doesn't matter. The kid loses because his parents are split up, and he doesn't see as much of either one of them. But the only people that actually win in that situation is the lawyers. And I felt like this movie aged me. I felt like as I was watching it, I felt about 20 years older, because by the end of it, I'm trying to be a divorce expert, and so is my wife, and we're going back and forth about this. But it's sad, and it's sad how you see how people drift apart like that, and that's a very real thing. But it'll also kind of remind you of the good things that you may have in a relationship, and help you kind of not take those for granted, because it's a very sobering movie, very real.
It's funny that you mentioned that it reminds you of the good things, because the movie opens up with them talking about all the things that they love about each other, but are unwilling to say it. And I thought it was weird, because the imagery at the very beginning of the film is warm. It's it's highlighting the good things about each character. She reads her half and then he reads his, and you see what each character likes about the other, which I thought was very 500 Days of Summer-y. I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but
Nope.
it feels very much like that. But then the right after they're done saying that, it cuts and you see them in this like white, static and sterile office, and neither of them looks happy, and it's such an emotional shift that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the film. One part of the movie that like I couldn't, like, I was literally watching it like this, like when he's talking about the thing he does with the knife.
I know.
And he accidentally
open.
slices his hand open in the wrong way. Like that could have gone really bad.
Yeah.
I was literally watching it. I was like telling like the girl as she's like trying to open the door. I was like, open the fucking door, get out, so you can call an ambulance.
Like he's like dripping blood all over. Oh my god.
Which I thought was also comical in a way, because like
it was.
He's trying to cover it, and
they,
it's like seeping through his shirt, and it's on the door frame. Like I was like, oh my god, this guy.
Yeah. They meant for that to be like a little bit of kind of comedic relief.
Yeah.
I mean, it's intense, and it's sad when the kid walks by and he's like laying on the ground. That's kind of a sobering thing too. That child is completely dependent on him, and there he is. Like, he can't ask that kid for help.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to feel like he's at this point where the entire world, these lawyers, everybody's scrutinizing him to make sure he's a capable parent, and then he freaking slices his arm open.
And it's funny because I feel like he did better than Scarlett
Right.
Johansson's character in the interview process, where she's like divulging how much drugs she's done, and but then he does that, and I'm like, oh man, like you're not selling yourself, you're not looking good as a unit, like.
Yeah. This movie definitely emphasized some of the fallacies in the divorce system, I guess. I mean, again, I've never been through a divorce, so I can only relate so much, but this felt like you were watching almost like a documentary. I mean, this is a very real, and it's not a happy ending kind of movie. It's a kind of just complacent ending, and you just kind of watch it for what it is, and that's why it almost feels like you're watching just a documentary, because it's not. They don't tie it all up with bows and rainbows at the end. They don't get back together. You have the kid who, they basically learn how to make it work through a divorce, and that's it. It's not Disney. They're not gonna, fall in love with each other again, and it's not a typical rom-com where they go to therapy and the therapist assigns them things, and through doing those they fall in love again.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's real. It's a real movie, and I think that's a nice break for a lot of people, just with a lot of the content that's been out lately. I mean, God, like the #1 show on Netflix right now is like that Too Hot to Handle show, where it's like the super attractive people and their challenge is, oh, you can't touch each other for a month. Like, give me a break. You know what I mean? Who can relate to that? Who can relate to that? But this, I think everybody can relate to it a little bit. Everybody who is either in a relationship or has been in a relationship, or, you can see it, you can use it as kind of a deterrent. You can use it as a reminder of the good things. People who have been through a divorce, I would imagine, and I would imagine that that's probably pretty real. I think that that's a pretty accurate depiction.
Yeah.
I liked this movie though. I thought it was a good story.
Same.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was different, and I thought it was very well done.
It's funny because it was interesting seeing each of the characters through the other character's eyes, because they're basically arguing with other people about the other person. They're putting a light on all of their flaws, even and not just through the lawyers, but to their friends and stuff. But neither of them can stop talking about the other one. And there was a point in the movie when she mentions she was reading the script for this pilot that she's trying to get published and trying to get produced into a show, and she's on the flight to LA. It's towards the beginning of the movie, and she tells her mom that it's funny. I was reading the script as if I was Charlie, and I stopped liking it. And so it's an interesting thing to say, because she's showing that so much of her life was through her husband, and she didn't get to live it herself, like to the point where like she's not even with him anymore, and she can't stop seeing things through his eyes or feeling his opinion in her head. Which, I mean, it's kind of like, it shows you that maybe they're not meant to work together as a couple, but it's also really sad because, you do see some of the chemistry is still there, like they're arguing over who's getting what with the lawyers, and you see them share a moment where they both laugh.
Right.
And so it's really sad because it is very real. You keep saying it is very real that, just because you love someone doesn't mean that it's enough. And I think that's kind of the theme of the movie, that it's not about love. It's more about the communication process. And it takes a lot more than just loving each other to make it work. But there's just so many very real moments, like when they're arguing and he's telling her that he wants her to die.
Yeah, he's clearly, he's just speaking out of rage at that point, out of emotion.
Yeah.
He doesn't mean that, of course.
Of course, yeah. And he says it to her, he apologizes while he's on his knees.
Right.
And I thought that was a beautiful shot, because you have this male character who easily was the one that was kind of running the house. He was the one that did the cooking and the cleaning. He's the one that, ran the theater company. And I think that is a lot of what she feels she resents him for, that she didn't get her own voice in the relationship. But then to see this character who is from what we understand, was the one with the power in the relationship, suddenly brought to his knees. And, we have the image, such a far away image. It's a long shot of the entire room, and we just see her standing over him, comforting him while he's on his knees. And it's the first time that we see him really without power, for real, because the entire movie he's basically struggling just to pay for the lawyer and to do everything. But it's showing the humanity of the characters, and I thought it was just very well shot. At least that scene was very beautiful.
Yeah, I like this one, man. Do you have anything else on it? Because that's basically it for me. I mean, it's, not a whole lot happens in the realm of where the plot goes. It just, you're kind of watching the process kind of play out.
Yeah, so I did notice a couple things. One I noticed was that Monopoly kept being brought up throughout the film a lot.
It did.
And I'm sure there's significance there. I'm not a huge Monopoly player. I think it takes too long, so I'm not, but I feel like, and money gets brought up a lot too, and so I wonder if there's some significance in that they were playing Monopoly. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm just bullshitting at this point, but maybe their entire life was a game that they were just trying to win. And they mentioned that there is no winning a couple times in the movie. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is that we see two Halloweens throughout the film, and in both of those Halloweens, Adam Driver's character Charlie, in the first one, he plays the Invisible Man, somebody who's not there, and that's very much what he feels like. Like, he's lost a voice at this point because all of his communication is through this lawyer, which I think is super interesting. But then at the end, when they've kind of made it work, it's been a year, and they're figuring out how to be co-parents, and he's in the same city and stuff. He goes as a ghost, and you see, the family at the very front, dressed up like the Beatles, and they're all, in beautiful, bright colors, and he's in the back of all of them with a sheet covering him. And you don't even notice it at first, because the very next shot, he's got the thing folded up in his arm, and you don't see the costume anymore. He's not wearing it. But I think it's just interesting that he chose to be a character that is basically invisible for both Halloweens. Yeah. And I think there's a very powerful symbolism in that.
I'm sure it's how he feels.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
The kid was, the kid's staying in LA. He only gets to see him when he travels there, which I guess at the end he said he takes up a residency at UCLA, so he'll be there more, which is good. But yeah, he feels like he lost his son. He feels like his son throughout the whole movie was kind of drifting more towards the mother, towards Scarlett Johansson. She clearly was a little closer to the kid and connected with the kid a little better, and he was probably a little too indulged in his work, of course. That's no secret. But you see that, and so I'm sure he did feel completely invisible. And look, again, it's a movie that'll spark a little bit of debate, which is why I would definitely recommend, people watch it with their significant other or whatever you want to do. I mean, the system's not perfect. When you get into a legal binding marriage, to get out of that, you're going through the legal system again, and people have a whole wide range of opinions on that. But, is it right? Is it wrong? I mean, hey, she clearly was, able to prove that she could be the better parent to her kid, and the kid should stay there. And I don't disagree with that based on the information we were given in the movie. But yeah, I could imagine that he probably would feel pretty invisible. In both cases, he kind of was becoming so. The kid was wanting the mother more, and he's a young kid, and he was at a kind of a sensitive age in his life. But yeah, I liked this one. I liked it a lot.
Now, I think that being an independent film, I think one of the things that people might have a hard time relating to is that it very much reads like a stage play. There's a lot of monologuing. There's a lot of sharing of like inner emotion, and I think for some people that might turn them away from the film, especially for people who didn't exactly have a theater upbringing like I did. I went to the theater all the time. And so for me, it felt very familiar, especially with some of the weird things they were doing with his stage play. Like for some people that's, watching it, they're probably like, what is going on? They're holding her sideways and they got the red light and all that. For some people that might be bizarre, and it might separate them from the story for a moment. It might be a little jarring to see, some of the weird things that like people kind of make fun of with theater companies, because they're, it's such a bizarre thing.
Yeah.
So, and you have a couple moments where both actors sing. And interestingly enough, they both, she's singing about Bobby and he's singing about Rob, which are both Roberts. And so I feel like there's some significance in that even through the divorce, there was a connection there that neither of them was aware of. They're both feeling the same thing. And so I thought that was interesting, which, by the way, Adam Driver has actually kind of a nice voice. I was not expecting that.
He's got a pretty lengthy... That scene went on a little longer than I agree. It needed to.
I agree.
And
again, it's a stage thing. I think it's a little too much like a stage play. And so I agree. I think it did go on for a little too long. To the point where it was almost comical. Like all these people are having dinner in the background and he just suddenly breaks out into song and, nobody claps for him or anything. It's just like, I would have thought it was a little strange, but the last thing I have to say is that I don't know if you teared up or anything, but at the very end, for me, the part that hit me the most was when the little boy is reading the list of things that she wrote about Charlie's character, and that she was unwilling to tell him how much she cared about him and the things that she liked about him, and you see that his son is not only reading, like basically for the first time after he's been struggling the whole movie, but there's two parts in that list, and Adam Driver, Charlie, he sits down and he starts reading it with them, and he holds himself together pretty well, knowing what it is. But there's a moment when he's, it's kind of hinted that he had an abusive parent, and they were both alcoholics and that kind of stuff, and the little boy is reading it, and he starts reading it, and he says, there was a lot of alcohol involved in his past, but he says there was a lot of alcohol, and he just kind of cuts himself off, like he didn't want his son to hear it.
Through it.
Right. But his son can still read. And there's a moment of realization where the little boy looks up at his father, and I think there's this like moment of clarity between them where his son is realizing for the first time that his dad has his faults and that his dad has this past that isn't perfect. And it's, to me, that hurt a lot, not because I understand that in any way. My parents, I love them both, but it's one of those things where like it's a child having to see a little bit of what being an adult is like, and then the last thing that he reads, when she says, "I will love him forever, no matter what," I think it's something along the lines, and he can't get through that. He breaks down crying, and he's trying to hold it together for his son, who's right there, and she's in the background, completely out of focus, but she's there. And for me, like, dude, I started like tearing up, and it's one of those relatable things. It's a very human emotion to feel loss and to feel the weight of losing somebody you love, whether it's through death or the death of a relationship. So, it's definitely not a movie that you're going to watch if, for feel good, but
no,
I would highly recommend it. I think it's a great film.
It's a nice break from a lot of the content that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
We've said this word a million times, but it's very real.
Yeah. Visceral.
It's very visceral, and it's a discussion piece for sure. You're going to be talking about it. You'll probably talk about it through the movie. I think it's a great movie to watch, and I think it rightfully earns the reception that it got. It has a 95% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and an 85% audience score. And I think that's pretty much in line with where I would put it. I mean, again, I try to rate these movies on what they are. This is not Star Wars. This is not a horror movie like The Lighthouse. You can't rate it in the same kind of realm. But
Absolutely.
as kind of an artsy indie sort of discussion piece, yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. The heavy-hitting actors did a great job. For what it is, I'd give this one a 9 out of 10. I would definitely recommend you watch it, especially with your significant other. Whether you have or have not been through a divorce, I think everybody can kind of at least appreciate what they're going through, and I think that's kind of the genius of this film. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for me. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. There's a few things that work against it, like some of the monologuing. Just trying to view it, perspective of. I'm trying to see it through the perspective of some of the viewers who might come into this not really knowing what it is. But solid movie, honestly. Solid acting. The cinematography is great. It's subtle. It's not in your face. The writing is great. It touches on some real human emotions on a real level that I think anybody can relate to. And it feels complete, even though it doesn't have a happy ending.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so go watch it. And that's it. With that, we wrap up episode 1 of Critic and the Common Man. So if you guys are still with us, again, comment down below for all these films. Let us know what you think. Smash the like button, the subscribe button if you want to hear more. We're going to definitely be coming out with some new content here. We're just starting out with our social media pages too. So if you could give the Instagram some love, we'll be coming up with everything there, but we'll keep you posted.
And let us know what movies you guys
totally
want.
yeah let us know what movies you want us to review, and we will do it. But we're all stuck at home, hopefully for not much longer, but movies are universal. We'll still be watching them. So that's it. Critic and the Common Man, episode 1.
Thank you guys for watching.
Chris, take us out of here. That's it. Peace.
Later.